Beyond the Gates next week, August 11th to 15th, 2025, teases that Haley's world begins to crumble as soon as Bill finds his way back into Danny's orbit. It's not that Danny and Bill are strangers. They once shared a deep, unspoken bond of marriage, the kind that leaves its mark long after the paperwork is done and the ring is gone. There's a language between them that doesn't need to be interpreted, a shared history, quick jokes, a quiet recognition of each other's confidences. For Haley, who's been keenly aware that she's entered Bill's life since Act 2, that familiarity is a poison. She had been the one to lure Bill away, though in truth, it was more a spark of fleeting desire than the steady flame of love. What they had felt urgent at the time, intoxicating in its defiance of boundaries, but now, standing on the sidelines watching Danny slide her hand onto Bill's shoulder with effortless ease, Haley feels the crack in her foundation widen. Danny's touch isn't provocative. It isn't meant for show. And somehow that makes it worse because it's a touch that belongs, as if no time has passed and nothing between them has truly changed. When Danny speaks to Bill, her voice is low, calm, and laced with a kind of measured compassion Haley can't seem to replicate. She tells him not to let Haley's youth and unpredictability wound him too deeply, hinting that Haley will eventually give him the children he wants. The words seem supportive on the surface, but Danny knows exactly what she's doing. She's planting a seed not just of hope, but of doubt, making sure Bill remembers there's a safer, surer place he could return to if the chaos of his current life becomes unbearable. She even reminds him, almost casually, that he still has Naomi and Chelsea in his life, names that carry the weight of stability and long-term loyalty. Bill listens, nods, and something in his eyes shifts. It's the first flicker of recognition that maybe Danny is the only one who has ever truly known him, what he wants, what he fears, the dreams he won't speak aloud. And once that realization starts to take root, regret follows close behind. He remembers the moment he walked away from Danny, the months of tension, the heated arguments that became a wall between them. He remembers convincing himself Haley was an escape, a breath of fresh air, when maybe she was just a distraction. Haley notices the change in him almost immediately. She sees the way his gaze lingers on Danny, the softness in his expression when they talk. The night she catches Danny's arm draped over his shoulder, she feels something inside her twist violently. When Danny finally leaves, Haley wastes no time. Her words are sharp, her tone dripping with sarcasm. She accuses him of slipping back into old habits, of holding onto a love story that should have been left behind. Bill tries to defend himself, but the air between them is thick with accusation, and, before long, the conversation erupts into a full-blown argument. The fights become more frequent. At first, Haley brushes them off as a symptom of tension over Danny's reappearance. But Bill starts noticing other things, small, evasive behaviors. Questions he asks are met with vague answers, and any conversation about starting a family is quickly steered in another direction. He's not blind. The reluctance in her voice, the stiffness in her body when he mentions children, it doesn't match the image of the eager, doting partner she once pretended to be. Late at night, when she thinks he's asleep, Haley slips away into the next room. The soft murmur of her voice, too low for him to make out words, becomes a nightly pattern. It takes time for the pieces to click together, but when they do, the picture is damning. She's reporting to summoning a shadow figure Bill can't yet identify. And suddenly, the truth about her hesitation to have children comes into sharp focus. The pregnancy had been nothing more than a performance, a carefully staged illusion to keep him anchored while she pursued some other agenda entirely. Meanwhile, the drama in Bill's life finds echoes in other corners. Ted's world starts to fray when Nicole, calm but resolute, announces her decision to file for divorce. The news hits him harder than he expects. It's not that he didn't see cracks in their relationship, but the finality of the word divorce lands like a blow. Anita, ever pragmatic, offers him a sliver of hope. If he truly wants Nicole back, he'll have to fight for her, not with desperate pleas or empty promises, but with the kind of determination that proves he's worth another chance. The idea is tempting, but Anita's words carry a challenge. This will not be easy, and Ted knows it. Nicole, for her part, isn't waiting around. She's already seeing Andre, whose presence in her life feels like the fresh start she's been craving. Whether Andre is a passing infatuation or something deeper, Ted can't tell, but every time he sees them together, the path back to her feels more impossible. Still, he can't shake the pull of what they once had. Kat's storyline twists in its own quiet way. She agrees to a date with Thomas, but from the start, something feels off. Dancing with him, she's struck by an inexplicable irritation. Every step feels like a mismatch, every laugh forced. Thomas notices the shift in her mood, the way her smile fades in and out like a faulty light. By the end of the night, he's withdrawn, his enthusiasm drained. In the void Kat creates, another figure slips in, Eva, whose charm and attentiveness offer Thomas the ease he's been missing. Elsewhere, Tyrell and Samantha find themselves swept up in an unexpected joy, the return of Martin and Smitty. The reunion is tender at first, a mix of relief and tentative forgiveness. Smitty, who had been holding on to anger over Martin's absence, finally lets go, choosing reconciliation over resentment. For a moment, it feels like a corner has been turned, that maybe this time, the bonds will hold. But the fragile peace shatters when Naomi and Jacob arrive with news that sends ripples through the group. They've found Tyrell and Samantha's biological mother. It's the kind of revelation that unearths a flood of questions about loyalty, identity, and what it means to truly belong. The certainty Tyrell and Samantha had been clinging to begins to unravel, threatening to pull them back into a past they thought they had left behind. Through all these threads, a quiet tension builds, connecting each storyline like invisible wire. Bill, trapped between the comfort of the past and the chaos of the present, starts to wonder if the life he's living is built on lies. Haley, playing a dangerous game with secrets and half-truths, edges closer to a breaking point. Ted wrestles with the line between persistence and obsession, while Nicole weighs the allure of new love against the history she can't erase. Kat drifts toward disillusionment, Thomas toward temptation, and Tyrell and Samantha toward an uncertain reunion that could either heal them or tear open old wounds. The air feels heavier, as if the gates, whatever they symbolize, are starting to creak open, revealing not just what lies beyond, but the cost of stepping through. And while no one can see the full shape of what's coming, everyone feels it, the subtle shift in gravity, the way the days seem to stretch tighter, the space between them buzzing with the inevitability of what's about to break. Bill's thoughts became more turbulent with each passing day, a constant churn of suspicion, regret, and the gnawing feeling that the ground beneath his marriage was crumbling. He began noticing details that once slipped past him: a sudden change in Haley's phone habits, her increasingly vague explanations for late nights, the quick way she'd changed the subject whenever he mentioned Danny. What unsettled him most wasn't her avoidance, but the hollowness in her voice when she said his name, as if her affection had been rehearsed, repeated so often it no longer carried any real weight. One evening, when Haley stepped into the garden to take some air, Bill lingered in the shadows of the hallway, catching faint snippets of her voice. Her tone was low and conspiratorial, but the tension in it was unmistakable. He could hear no name, no clear identity on the other end, only her murmured confirmation of everything's in place, and he suspects nothing. The words lodged in his mind like splinters, refusing to be ignored. That night, while Haley slept soundly, he sat awake in the living room, staring into the dark, the shape of a betrayal forming in his mind that he couldn't yet prove but could no longer dismiss. Across town, Danny found herself thinking about Bill more than she intended. She told herself her concern was practical after all. They had history, and she knew the man's strengths and weaknesses better than anyone. But somewhere beneath the surface, an ember of something more was beginning to glow again. She hadn't planned to get caught in his orbit. It was dangerous territory, yet the more she saw the tension in his eyes, the more she felt drawn to steady him. Haley, on the other hand, could feel the shift. The facade she had built was under strain, and she knew Bill was watching her more closely. So she pivoted, softening her tone, offering small gestures of affection in the hope of redirecting his suspicion. But her performance wasn't perfect. Tiny cracks appeared, moments where her guard slipped, revealing impatience or irritation she couldn't mask. And each crack made Bill's resolve to uncover the truth harden. Ted, meanwhile, had taken Anita's advice to heart. In his mind, the only path forward was to reclaim Nicole before she drifted too far into Andre's world. But his idea of winning her back was clumsy at best. He tried grand gestures, flowers sent to her office, sudden appearances at places she liked to visit, but each one only seemed to push her further away. Nicole's life with Andre was light, unburdened by the old arguments and disappointments she had carried with Ted. Yet, even as she enjoyed that newness, there were moments when a memory of her life with Ted slipped in, uninvited. It unsettled her, leaving her wondering whether what she had with Andre was truly better or simply different. Kat's dissatisfaction with Thomas reached a quiet breaking point. They no longer danced, no longer shared the easy warmth they had once attempted to create. Thomas, feeling the weight of her coolness, found unexpected comfort in Eva's attention. She listened, she laughed at his dry humor, she didn't make him feel as though every word was being measured. What began as casual conversation soon blurred into something heavier, the kind of connection that pulled him further from Kat with each encounter. Kat noticed the change, but part of her wasn't sure whether to fight for him or let him go, as though some part of her had already made peace with the end before it even came. The reunion between Tyrell, Samantha, Martin, and Smitty should have been the beginning of something new. For a while, it was meals shared without tension, laughter that came naturally, a sense of family they had missed. But the announcement from Naomi and Jacob hovered over them like an approaching storm. The news that their biological mother had been found brought mixed emotions: curiosity, fear, and a strange sense of disloyalty. Tyrell feared opening a door that might never close, while Samantha wondered if meeting her would bring answers to questions she had long stopped asking. The more they discussed it, the more the possibility became unavoidable. Martin, still guilty for his earlier absence, urged caution, worried that the truth could cause more harm than good. Smitty was quieter about it, though his eyes betrayed a similar concern. But Naomi and Jacob were convinced that knowing the truth was worth the risk, believing that no matter how painful, it would be better than living with the unknown. Bill's growing mistrust of Haley began to shape his days. He became quieter around her, more deliberate in his actions, all while quietly gathering clues. He started arriving home unexpectedly, checking her stories against reality, and even going so far as to skim through the call logs on their shared phone bill. Each discovered numbers he didn't recognize, messages deleted before morning added weight to the sinking feeling in his chest. Yet he said nothing, choosing instead to let her believe her game was still intact. He wanted to know exactly who was behind her midnight calls before he made his move. Danny crossed paths with him more often, sometimes by chance, sometimes not. Each meeting seemed to last a little longer, their conversations slipping from polite updates into more personal territory. She didn't ask outright about his marriage, but Bill could tell she was reading between every line he spoke. In her presence, he felt the pull of familiarity, of a time when his world made sense. And though he wouldn't admit it aloud, the thought of returning to that stability began to feel less like a fantasy and more like an eventuality. Haley sensed this too. Her jealousy deepened, sharpening into paranoia. She doubled her efforts to keep Bill occupied, arranging outings, hinting at travel, even trying to revive the idea of starting a family, though her words rang hollow, and Bill could tell her heart wasn't in it. Behind her smiles, she was calculating her next move, torn between maintaining her position and cutting ties before Bill uncovered too much. Ted's pursuit of Nicole was met with another setback when Andre, sensing the tension, began subtly tightening his hold. He encouraged Nicole to travel with him, to spend more time away from the places where Ted might appear. Ted, growing desperate, began questioning whether his determination was rooted in love or the fear of losing something familiar. Anita watched from the sidelines, concerned that Ted's efforts were pushing him toward a confrontation he wasn't ready to face. Kat, unable to ignore the growing distance with Thomas, finally confronted him. The conversation was tense, filled with half-truths and careful omissions. Neither admitted outright what they both knew, that Thomas's connection with Eva had crossed an unspoken line. Instead, they left the discussion unfinished, a jagged wound that would only deepen with time. For Tyrell and Samantha, the decision loomed. Meeting their mother could mean closure, or it could reopen wounds they had fought hard to heal. Martin's voice of caution clashed with Naomi's insistence that they at least hear her out. Jacob offered quiet support, though even he admitted uncertainty about what the right choice might be. The siblings exchanged long, silent looks, each knowing the other's fears without needing to speak them. The threads of each life seemed to tighten, pulling everyone toward moments they couldn't yet see but could already feel pressing in. Bill moved closer to uncovering Haley's secret. Danny's presence in his life grew harder to ignore. Ted's pursuit of Nicole balanced on the edge of obsession. Kat and Thomas stood at the brink of collapse. And Tyrell and Samantha approached a truth that could alter their sense of self forever. And somewhere in the shadows, the unnamed figure who held Haley's loyalty waited patiently, knowing the game was reaching its most dangerous stage. Bill had reached the point where silence no longer felt like control, it felt like surrender. Every day he carried the weight of what he knew. Every night he replayed Haley's whispers in his mind, trying to fit the pieces into a shape that made sense. But the longer he waited, the more the truth seemed to rot beneath the surface. Danny's steady presence had become his compass in the chaos. When he finally confided in her about his suspicions, she didn't react with shock or pity. She simply listened, her gaze steady, as if she had already suspected as much. "You need to know who you're really up against," she said. "Not just her. Whoever's pulling the strings." The idea of being manipulated by someone outside the marriage stoked a deeper anger in Bill, one that stripped away the hesitation he'd been clinging to. He hired someone quietly, through an old contacto, trace the calls, and find the voice behind Haley's midnight conversations. The results came faster than he expected, and when the name surfaced, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone from Bill's past business dealings, a rival he had undercut years ago. The betrayal was no longer abstract, it was a deliberate, calculated attack. Meanwhile, Haley was unraveling. The pressure of keeping her lies intact was eating at her, and her interactions with Bill had grown strained to the point of brittleness. She tried one last tactic, suggesting they leave town for a while, start fresh somewhere new. But Bill refused, his calm demeanor masking the storm inside him. He wasn't leaving. Not until this ended on his terms. Ted's spiral toward Nicole reached its inevitable collision when he appeared unannounced at a weekend retreat she was attending with Andre. What he thought would be a bold declaration of love became a public scene that left Nicole furious and Andre wary. That night, Nicole made her position clear. She didn't want to be fought over like a prize. She needed space Ted had been unwilling to give. In the days that followed, Ted finally confronted the truth that chasing her wasn't bringing her back, it was driving her further away. Whether she would return to him someday was no longer in his control. Kat and Thomas's quiet fracture became permanent when she learned from a mutual friend that he and Eva had been seen together at a late-night bar, leaning in close, laughing like old lovers. There was no explosive confrontation, just a long, measured conversation in which Kat acknowledged what both of them already knew. By the end, Thomas was gone, and Kat was left in the stillness of a home that suddenly felt much too large. For Tyrell and Samantha, the day of meeting their mother arrived like a storm. She was nothing like they had imagined, softer in voice, older than they expected, her eyes carrying both regret and a strange hope. The conversation was halting at first, each side testing the boundaries of what they could ask, what they could reveal. Pain lingered in the gaps between words, but so did a fragile sense of possibility. When they left, neither could say for certain whether the meeting had healed anything, but both agreed on one thing: the questions they had carried their whole lives no longer felt as heavy. Bill's final confrontation with Haley came on a quiet evening. She was in the living room, pretending to scroll through her phone, when he placed a printed record of her calls on the coffee table. The name of the man she had been contacting stared up at her in black ink. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she laughed a small, brittle sound and said, "You always did underestimate me." What followed wasn't a shouting match. It was colder than that. Bill told her he knew about the false pregnancy, the manipulation, the scheme to bleed him of his wealth. He didn't need her confession. The proof was already in his hands. Her only response was to stand, pick up her bag, and walk out without looking back. Later that night, Danny found him sitting alone in the kitchen. He didn't look triumphant, only relieved, as if he had finally stopped holding his breath after months underwater. They didn't talk about what came next, only sat together in a quiet that felt like the first calm after a long storm. Ted began the slow work of redirecting his life, pouring his energy into the things he had neglected while chasing Nicole. He didn't stop caring for her, but he understood now that love couldn't be demanded, it had to be chosen. Kat, though still nursing the wound Thomas left behind, surprised herself by feeling more free than broken. Tyrell and Samantha, too, found themselves in unfamiliar emotional territory, cautiously exploring a connection with their mother while holding on to the family they had built with Martin and Smitty. As for Bill, the future wasn't neatly tied into a happy ending. Danny was in his life, yes, but they both knew the road back to what they once had would be long and uncertain. Still, for the first time in years, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. And that, more than anything, was enough to step forward. The gates that had stood so heavy and immovable in each of their lives hadn't swung open all at once. They had creaked, resisted, and finally given way in uneven bursts. What lay beyond was not all light, nor all darkness, but it was theirs to walk into, and for now, that was enough.